Hello, everybody. Welcome to our second training video in the DACODS system. If you are wanting to admit someone, please refer to our previous video that we made on DACODS admission. Today, we're going to look at searching for the records that we admitted and ultimately discharging that client. So first of all, we go back to our main message board here, and you'll see a drop down for DACODS. Under the DACODS tab, you can hit DACODS search.
I'm sorry, can we stop for a second? I think I'm supposed to be logged in as a provider so that we don't see anything we should.
Welcome everyone to our second training video in the DACODS training series. In our first video, we showed you how to do an admission record. Today, we're going to look at searching for that record and ultimately discharging that record. So starting here from our TMS message board, you would go to the top menu and look for DACODS search. Once you've selected DACODS search, the first thing you'll notice is your license number should be prominently here displayed, and you cannot change that. If you work at agencies with differing license numbers, you would have to log in separately to see the records for each of those different license numbers. Going across the board, there are several things that will aid you in your search. The first is the provider client number. The provider client number is the number of the record that you submitted to us previously in an admission. You can search for the record by that. More commonly, though, most people search for last name and first name. One of the things that it allows you to do in the system is you can begin the last name or the first name and search by like anybody with the last name of E, but then by putting a percentage sign in, it would go ahead and give you everyone that has a last name of E. That way, if you have trouble remembering exactly how a last name was spelled, it will give you a list to choose from. The other thing that you can search for is by date of birth. If you'll notice right next to the date of birth, there is a little calendar that you can put in dates of birth. However, I would suggest, because that calendar is always going to default to today, having to scroll back years to find a date of birth, it's much easier to just go in and type in the date of birth. You can also search by social security number. That is in the middle of the screen. We're going to skip the drop-down box because I want to save that one for last. Now, admission date is similar to the date of birth, but here the calendar function is much more handy because this is going to, again, give you a current date so you can look for people recently admitted very quickly. Finally, if you're looking for someone with a specific modality, if you have multiple modalities in your system, so for instance, if you wanted to look up people that were in your DUI level 2 therapy and education, you would just simply select that in the drop-down, do the search, and it will pull only the clients that are in that modality. Now, I do want to go back to the admit type, because this is one of the big gotchas in the system that has many people calling the agency saying, help, I've lost a record. So essentially, the system is set up to default to admission. And the reason it does that is we felt like it would be much more of a helpful tool if when you originally do a search, you're only looking for people that are active in your clinic. So you're not having to sort through. If you've been in business, let's say for 10 years, we didn't feel like it would be very handy to be searching through 10 years of discharge records to find that open admission. So if you're looking for someone active in your client, you would select admission. On the other hand, if you truly are looking for someone who has previously been in your clinic but is no longer there, they have been discharged, you would have to change that tab to discharge. And we'll look at a couple of different clients in both categories here in a second. One last thing, if you are a special connections provider or if you are serving pregnant women, you can, because they are a priority population, you can click on those boxes and it will pull up everyone in your agency that is either pregnant or part of the Special Connections program. So let's start with what we originally talked about. Let's look up any active admission in the clinic. If you want to just see who's active, all you have to do is go to the very bottom of the screen and hit the button search. Because your license number is already populated, you do not have to put in any additional fields. Here you will see that you have one active client by the name of Frank Flyer, and he was admitted on May 1st of 2019. Let's go ahead and edit that record. So when you push the edit button, what you'll see is the admission record that has been previously submitted to us. Now, many times people need to make updates to this admission record. So for instance, if we go down to the primary drug type, here is one of the things that many people will say, this person came in with a primary drug of LSD, but you found out through a few weeks of treatment that this person also has a marijuana addiction. So you would go over to the secondary drug type and put in marijuana, for instance. We would then, as we have before, use abuse or dependence. In this case, we'll say abuse again. And we'll say that this person has used this 30 days in the last, and their route of administration is smoking. And we'll say their age of first use was also 10 years, when they were 10 years old. Go down to the bottom of the screen, and you will see an update button. By selecting this update button, you will have edited the admission date that you had sent to us. So many people, find out additional information about a client as treatment goes on. It is perfectly acceptable to go into this admission record and make updates. We're going to come back to this record in a minute, and we'll show you how to do a discharge. But first, let's go back to our search screen and look at how you would view someone who has been discharged. So going back to the DACODS search, you would flip the admit type to discharge. Hit the search button, and there you will see all the people that have been previously in your system. Frank has not been discharged, so he is not in this list. But I do want to point out something a little bit on the bottom here. You'll see the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4 over here at the bottom. For ease of viewing, we allow 10 records per view. So this tells you that there's approximately somewhere between 40 and 50 records here, and you can span through them using the next button. You'll see on the left-hand side of the screen, it will give you the total number of records being 43. So by looking at the bottom of the screen, you know how many people that have previously been in your system, and you'll have a tool to maneuver through those over on the right-hand side. The other thing that's handy is right now, this is coming in alphabetical order by last name. That is the default. But maybe you want to see people based on their first name, or maybe even more common, admission date. You want to know when people were admitted. So if you click on admission date, what that's going to do is it's going to reorder your list in the order of when that person was admitted. Click on it again, and it goes in descending order, showing you the last person, or the most current admission date of someone who had been discharged. All of the fields that have an underline in the heading are places that you can do sorts through. You could even do a sort on middle initial, but I wouldn't recommend it. The other thing that you can do in this is, if you wanted to have a list of all the people that were discharged in your system, you would go down here and hit the print button. The print button is going to open up a report that you can use. And again, you'll see here, put into alphabetical order by last name as default. One of the things that you will have to do when you hit print is to allow the pop-up blocker to occur. So if you're having trouble getting this report to show up, please enable your pop-up blocker on your security system. While TMS doesn't have a lot of separate reports, you'll notice print buttons on almost every screen allows you to do different prints. So going back to the search screen for a second, we'll go back to DACODS and we'll do a search, but this time we will look for a specific modality. Let's look for traditional outpatient. Let's do a search on that. And what you'll notice here is there's 22 people that are in traditional outpatient. And again, so if you wanted to print something here, just showing your the people that are in traditional outpatient, you can do that as well. So a lot of flexibility in printing out these rosters. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at the second person here, Denise Flyer. We're going to go into the view here because this, once the record has been discharged, it is no longer available for editing. If you need edits from this point forward, you would need to contact BHA staff to do so. So you'll notice now on the discharge record, it defaults over to the discharge tab, and you can see all of the information that was entered for that client. We will go through these field by field when we do the discharge here in a second, but this will allow you once again at the bottom of the screen to do a print, and it will allow you to print the completed DACODS right here. There you go. If you need to print out the discharge, that is what it looks like. All right, so we've showed you how to use the search. We've showed you how to do various reports. Let's go ahead and go back to the DACODS search for our open admission record, and do a discharge. Change the tab on admit type to admission and hit the search button. Here is our person. We're going to go into edit that person. In order to discharge a person, you have to go into edit mode. And again, because this is an admission record, it defaults to the admission screen in case you want to do an edit. In order to do a discharge, you would go hover over the discharge and click on that tab on the form. And that takes you to the discharge. Now you'll notice a couple of things right off the bat. There's a couple of fields in here like SSPA, and that is grayed out. The reason for that is these fields have to match what's on the admission record. So for instance, if you notice, hey, Frank Flyer's name is misspelled, it should be Frank Flyers with an S, you would have to go back to the admission record and change it there. If you then change that there and did an update, you would get a message that says record successfully saved. And when you go to the discharge, now it's corrected there. So if you are looking to update any of these fields that are grayed out, you would have to do so on the admission. All right, so the first few fields, date of birth, social security, first, last name, all of that has already been filled out. It's being pulled over from the admission. So the first thing we're going to really look at is zip code. The zip code is probably in most cases going to match what's on the admission, but we do leave this field for your editing purposes in case the client has moved. Now, the next few fields that you're looking at, we're going to look at things like employment status. These are what is considered by the federal government NOMs. So we want to capture any changes in employment status, housing situation, number of children, monthly income, etc. So here we're going to say that Frank is employed full-time. He currently does not have a mental health issue that we know of. His monthly income has soared to $5,000 per month. He has 2 people living on his income. One of those is a child, and his current living situation is independent living. These are all things that the federal government will take a look at and say, did we see improvement between the admission and the discharge on any of these fields? The next 2 fields are very interesting because what happens, unfortunately, with a lot of our clients is they may stop coming to treatment long before they're discharged. The date of last face-to-face contact is the last day the client actually appeared at treatment. So if someone, let's say, they were admitted on May 1st, 2019, but stopped coming to treatment on 5/1/2023, but they weren't technically, but that's when the last we saw them, but maybe we're just now getting around to discharging them because we've decided that they're no longer coming to the system. We could discharge them, for instance, today if we wanted to. We recommend not waiting that long, of course, to discharge people. Normally speaking, we would like to see those discharges come through within 30 days after the person has stopped coming or have lost contact with them. But here is a situation where when we start to look at length of stay, we don't want to look at the time where we did an administrative discharge. We want to see from the admission date to when the client was last seen. So these 2 fields can be different. The one thing that you will realize, though, is number 1, date of last face-to-face contact cannot be greater than discharge date. And of course, discharge date cannot be prior to admission date. Just little edits in the system. Finally, we'll say that this treatment has 3 different statuses that it could be. It could be completed. It could be a transfer situation. Or in this case, the person stopped coming on May 1st and they did not complete their treatment at this facility. And so we would then come to reason for discharge and say that that person, the client, stopped coming and contact efforts failed. Statutory commitment, again, if this is not an involuntary commitment or an emergency commitment client, please select none. If you have questions on this, please contact someone in the office. This is only for people that are being held on a hold. All right, now, if you remember correctly, when we were over in the admission screen, the primary and secondary drug types were LSD and marijuana, and you'll see again that those are being grayed out. Again, if during the time of treatment, this person, you need to make changes to this, the time to make those changes are when you're in the admission form, because the discharge form must match the admission form. Why? Because the next field is going to tell us how many days that they used your substance. So we want to measure the difference between admission and discharge. We're going to say this was very successful, and in both the LSD and marijuana, we're now seeing the client 0 use in the last 30 days. This is another of the national outcome measures. We want to see in treatment a reduction in days used for that client. Finally, on progress at time of discharge towards measurable treatment goals. Obviously, this person did not complete their treatment, but they did reduce their drug use. So in this case, we might go with moderate achievement. The one thing I will point out in that drop-down box is occasionally someone comes in and they get an assessment, but then they never show up to treatment. In that case, here you would put client completed the assessment only, but did not receive services. We want to make sure that when you do an assessment of someone and admit them, if they don't ever show up to treatment, we want you to go ahead and discharge them and use that status so we're aware of what happened. Finally, in the past 6 months, we're going to say that they didn't go to an emergency room, a hospital, a psych emergency room, or a psychiatric hospital. We're also going to say that the number of DUI arrests and other arrests was also 0 in the past 30 days. And we're going to talk about frequency of attendance. We're going to say that this person has been in a self-help program 15 of the last 30 days. All of the issues here we're going to put as moderate. And finally, for an outpatient client, there is number of outpatient hours and minutes that you can put in here that will tell us the number of hours that that person served in your were being treated in your clinic. At that point, you've finished the discharge, and you would simply add by pressing the add button. You should get a message that says record successfully saved. Now, if you go back to the DACODS screen, the search screen, and you search for any open admission records, you will get the message, we didn't find any matching records. The reason being is now that record has been discharged. So if you go back in and change the admit type to discharge, and let's just put Frank's first name in there, do a search, there is our Frank Flyers now successfully discharges. You'll notice over on type that it now has a type of C, meaning that that record is completed. Congratulations, you have done a DACODS discharge. And that concludes this training.